So there is a lot of new units in set 12 now, and you don't know how to build any of them. But don't worry my friends, because Exterior will teach you how to build the best in slot for any unit. Before we start, yes I kinda lied just for a clickbaity title, cause technically we don't have the stats yet to clarify what is the best in slot for each unit, but I can give you a general idea of what you can build on them in the PvE right now. For the best in slot overall for almost every ranged unit would be Last Whisper, IE, and Ginsu's Rage Blade. The reason why is because it's the most basic one to do, and it's probably like the most powerful thing to do right now. But don't forget, there is certain circumstances for different type of units. This is just for a general idea for every physical damage range unit. You can build these other items depending on your circumstances or needs during the game, but generally it's like your bolt items, which is attack speed, such as Ginsu's Rage Blade, Red Buff, Runan's Hurricane, Guard Breaker, or even Last Whisper. And then yes, they do different stuff, like Runan's Hurricane gives you more AoE. Guard Breaker technically doesn't have a bow in it, but it does have attack speed in it. And for Last Whisper's case, it breaks armor. So most units would need this. That's the reason why I say it's best in slot for most of these units. And then you have Giant Slayer. That's also technically a bow item, but it makes you shred tanks even quicker. So if you need this item, go for it. And then you have your amplification items such as Infinity Edge and Deathblade, where it gives you a lot more damage for the units. Reasons why I would say IE is the best in slot. You can do Deathblade depending on the unit, but most of the time IE would be better since this set is more of an ability casting set. And then you have your healing items such as Gunblade to heal your board, or if you want to heal for themselves, Hodge is fine as well. So you can build any of these items depending on the circumstances. But the rule of thumb is always build Last Whisper on almost every ranged unit because you need that armor break. Unless you can build an Even Shroud, that's fine, then you can skip the Last Whisper. But for majority of the time, it would be prioritize Last Whisper on every ranged unit. And you can get any amplification item such as Guard Breaker, Giant Slayer, IE, Deathblade, or even Hodge. And then if you have to as your last resort because you can't build it for whatever reason, you could do Gunblade. If you can't get a sword plus a heavier item, you could just do Gunblade. It's fine because it heals the board. And then for your attack speed item, if you can't get Ginsu's Rage Blade, you can always do like Red Buff is fine because it gives you a lot of attack speed and it also gives you anti-heal. If not, if you're playing for the early game, Runan's Hurricane is fine. Or like I said earlier, Guard Breaker is an okay attack speed item if you have to. If not, then you can do default to Giant Slayer. But Giant Slayer is technically more of an amplification item than it is attack speed item. That's just a default knowledge of just playing ranged unit overall. For most of us that don't know it, that's just the general way of how we play for ranged units. And then most of us won't know any of the units this set most likely. So we're gonna start off with our 1 cost unit, which is Namzi, Twitch, Ash, our 3 cost unit Jinx, and I put it out of order, my bad for this. 2 cost unit Kog'Maw, 4 cost unit Callista, 5 cost unit Smolder. So these are the range unit that can use all these items. Same with these units down here, which is 2 cost Tristana, 3 cost Ezreal, and 4 cost Varus. But they technically can also use a Spirit Soldier. So everything within this gray box, they can all use these items. And then technically these 3 can as well, but they also use Spirit Soldier, which is something you kind of have to prioritize on them because their mana pool is very big and they're more of ability casters than they are auto attackers. So you put like Spirit Soldier on them with like a Last Whisper plus an amplification item is good for these units. But the rest of these units, they don't need Spirit Soldier. And something I'd like to mention about the 4 cost unit Callista, she doesn't use this BIS setup. She mostly uses a Rage Blade plus an amplification such as Giant Slayer, IE, and Deathblade, and then you get your Fairy item on her. So she's one of the unique champions that don't follow this rule. But technically you can use any other items, it's fine. As long as you have a Rage Blade plus whatever, it doesn't matter. Moving on to our physical damage melee characters, and their best in slot for majority of these characters would be a Bloodthirster, Time's Resolve, and Asterix Gauge. If you cannot make this setup, generally you want to follow these rules, where you get 1 healing item, such as Bloodthirster, Hodge, or Gunblade, and you get 1 damage item, which is technically Asterix Gauge, or even a Time's Resolve, and you get like 1 defense item, which is technically Times is a defense item. Same with Edge of Night, and then QSS, so you can avoid CC. So technically that is kind of the rule that you want to build like melee units, but if you want to mix and match it, you can also put like 2 healing items plus like Edge of Night, or even like a Titans, so the units can last a lot longer. And you could think of them as like a melee ADC, or technically a bruiser. For our units that most of us don't know, is 1 cost unit Warwick, 3 cost unit Wukong, Hecarim, 4 cost unit Olaf, and our 5 cost units Camille and Briar. And then for our other units that can use all these items, plus a Giant Slayer and a Last Whisper, would be 1 cost unit Jace, 2 cost units Nyla and Akali, and these 2 are really goated right now together. They're like super strong in the meta. And our 4 cost unit Fiora. And then just for a reminder, the units in the gray don't really need Giant Slayer or Last Whisper. mainly due because these units are more of a carry type of units, and these units are more like a bruiser tankish types that like want to stay alive longer in fights. So these are like mostly like melee ADCs, while these ones are more like just straight up bruisers. And how you will build these units in the green, it would generally be like a Bloodthirster, a Titans plus one of these items, or you could take out the Titans and just put Bloodthirster in general, and then just put like Last Whisper plus like Edge of Night, just depending on the unit, but I'll explain more of that in detail later. And then for our section down here, we got the units that can use these items would be Adaptive Helm, Crown Guard, Onyx Spark, and Jewel Gauntlet. And most of you might notice that why isn't magical damage items? The reason why is because these units are magical units that are close range, which is 3 cost Kassadin, 3 cost Katarina, 4 cost Gwen, and 5 cost Diana. And technically, yes, they can also use these items on top. I say the worst one that you cannot really use on them would be Asterix Gauge, but the rest of the items are actually pretty decent on them. The reason why is because you kind of want them to survive longer, such as like Edge of Night is actually pretty good on them so they can last longer. And some of these items do give magical damage, such as Bloodthirster. It has some magic damage in it. Same with Gunblade, because it has a rod in it. And same with Titans, because the more stacks you get, the more AP you also get as well. But it does give more physical damage than it does magical damage. And some things to mention here, like Wukong technically is more of a tank than he is like a bruiser carry. But you can build him like that if you want to. Like using these items on him might be kind of fun. And he might be kind of strong with it. Like, who knows? As of the current meta right now, he's more of a tank. But maybe later in future, that can change. And for Hecarim's case, he can also use Last Whisper. But it's the case if he's a secondary carry and you need armor break. So you put that item on him, or even Shroud or something. And then for Nyla's case, she's technically like a ranged unit because she's 2 hexes. So she'd be more like an ADC type of role. But because she's only 2 hexes instead of 4, Bloodthirster, Titans plus like a Rage Blade would be really good on her. Or if not, like Last Whisper, or even Giant Slayer would be fine. And Akali technically is more of an assassin. So Bloodthirster, Titans, and IE would be a lot better on her because she's more of like an assassin that goes to the back line. And if yours case, it would be like Edge of Night, Bloodthirster, plus like one of these random items, or even like IE Giant Slayer is fine. But yeah, for the overall, for this page, it would be like everything in the gray can only use the gray, and in the green can use Last Whisper and Giant Slayer and all the items in the gray, and then the ones in the purple can use these magical damage items, and sometimes they can use the items in the gray. So it's just a general idea of what you can build. And our OCD killer, if your OCD didn't break yet for the other 2 slides, we have our magical damage, and most of the time the best in slot for almost every unit would be like Bloodthirster, Nashers, plus an amplification such as like Death Cap or Jewel Gauntlet. And then overall items that you can use for magical damage characters in general would be like meta items such as Adaptive Helm and Spirit Soldier, which is something you should always build on every magical unit. You need one of these items. And then plus our amplification items such as Archangel Staff, Death Cap, Giant Slayer, Jewel Gauntlet, Guard Breaker. So these are the items you would want for damage. And then you get our attack speed items such as Nashor's Tooth, Ginsu's Rage Blade, Static Shiv. And then if you have to build it, you can get rid of your amplification item or even the attack speed item and put a Gunblade in so you can make your board last longer, since this item will heal everyone on your board and the unit itself. And speaking of units, most of us won't know them, so I'm gonna start off with our 1 cost unit, which is Seraphine, Soraka, and then our 2 cost unit, which is Ari, Syndra, Zillion, and our 3 cost unit, Bard, and our 5 cost unit, Milio, Seraph, and Nora, and Yumi. So all these units in the gray can use these items, but there's also another unit within the gray that can also use these items, which is Rise. And the reason why the box is like this, and I'll explain it after we talk about the units in the bottom down here. The units in the bottom here are better to use blue buff because their mana cost is below 40, and blue buff thrives off of units that has lower mana cost because they keep casting more and more faster this way than having a Spirit Soldier or Adaptive Helm. And those units would be 1 cost Ziggs and Zoe, 2 cost Cassiopeia, 3 cost Veigar and Hui, and then 4 cost units, which is Karma and Nami. So these units are better off using a blue buff than a Spirit Soldier, but technically you can use a Spirit Soldier if you can't build a blue buff. And then now I can finally talk about the units in the purple here, and the reason why they're in like this because they can use the item Morellicon, since they are AoE unit, meaning they can hit multiple targets, which is like Hui, Karma, Nami, and Rise. They hit more than like 2 targets, so that's why it's really good on them. Technically Seraphine is one of them too, but because she's a 1 cost unit, I would prefer her to have more of like higher damage items than having a Morellicon on her. At least the meta might point towards that later down the line, which is something we don't know yet because we don't have the stats for it. But yes, technically, generally, all the units in the gray and the blue and the purple can use all these items in the gray, and then the ones down here in the blue can use the blue buff item, and then the ones in the purple can use plus Morellicon, and then the rest of the items. But Rise technically doesn't need blue buff, so that's the reason why I didn't put him down here. So technically, he is in the gray. But yeah, hopefully this kind of makes sense for you guys to see. Even though it kills your OCD, hopefully you understand what I'm trying to like point out here. And something I really like to mention here, for Rise's case, yes, I did say he always have a meta item like Spirit Soldier, Adaptive Helm, or even a blue buff for these units that need a blue buff. Rise is different. The reason why is because he's a Scholar, and Scholar gives you a lot of mana, so therefore you don't need a mana item on him. He's more of an attack speed champion, and the reason why is because attack speed scales with his damage, so Rage Blade is his best technically mana item. And then the rest of the items you build on him would be like Rage Blade with Archangel Staff and a Death Cap, or even like Jewel Gauntlet or something, or Merlocon, so you can like anti-heal the whole board. But yeah, that's like kind of like the mention that I want to say. Same with Xerath kinda, like technically you don't need like mana items on him, but the way how you build him is like you can build him like Burst Mage or Attack Speed Mage. It's up to you. And then finally for our tanks, the best in slot for majority of these tanks would be like a Gargano Stoneplate with our healing item Redemption, and because everything's mostly magical damage, Dragon's Claw would be really good for that. But generally you can build like Redemption for healing item, and then Warmonks for health, Sunfire for anti-heal, Steadfast Heart for damage reduction, Bramble Vest for armor, Protector's Vow for extra defense, same with Adaptive Helm, it gives you defense and mana back, even Shroud to break armor, Gargoyle Stoneplate for both armor and magic resist, and then our Dragon's Claw for magic resist. And then technically the unit that doesn't use these other two items down here, which is Crown Guard or Onyx Spark, would be Wukong, because Wukong is a physical damage unit. So as you can see, every tank unit is actually magical damage, but Wukong is a physical damage character. And then for all the other tank units, it would be 1-cost Blitzcrank, Elise, Jax, Lilia, and then our 2-cost unit, Galio, Nunu, Rumble, Shyvana, and our 3-cost unit, Mordekaiser, Shen, Swain, Vex, our 4-cost unit, Rakan, Tahm Kench, Taric, Nasus, and our 5-cost units, Diana and Morgana. Technically Morgana is more like a battle mage, but I would say it's just better to build her like tank so she can last longer. But her best items would be like maybe like a Death Cap, Adaptive Helm, and then +1 like tank item. So we can just say she's an outlier. You don't have to put her as a tank, so it's just depending on how you view her as. So basically generally everyone could build almost anything besides Wukong, building magical damage such as Crown Guard and Onyx Spark. And then things I like to mention here would be like Rumble, Mordekaiser. Honestly, later down the line, I could see them being potential like damage carries because they do a lot of damage. And in Morgana's case, she's more like a battle mage, so you can just build her like these two items with Adaptive Helm. That probably might be fine overall for her. And then Swain's kind of the same idea as Morgana, so you can just probably just build all those two. But yeah, that's about it. There's not really much I can say about this. They're just tanks that, well, for whatever reason, all of them do magical damage besides Wukong. And that is it for my clickbait title for best in slot items for units in set 12. If you have any questions, just let me know in the comment section down below. But if you're actually gonna ask me what is BIS for certain units, that I don't know because it's not live yet, so we don't have that information. Until then though, later.